Yo, what is up guys, this is TyrantX1 here and welcome to another game review. This time I'm reviewing Halo Spartan Assault. Apparently a twin-stick shooter developed by 343 Industries and Vanguard Games in cooperation with the development. Now, it's been a while since I've actually done another Halo review. In fact, probably about 2 years since I've done the Halo 4 review, so I felt like it's about time since I did Halo Spartan Assault, a Halo game not many people really seem to take note of or even speak about, to be honest. And honestly, going back to it, it's a little underrated in my opinion. The story takes place in between Halo 3 and Halo 4 as we play as Spartans Davis and Palmer as they try to defend the planet Dreyfus 5 from a splinter group of Covenant who still worship the words of the Prophet and have come to the planet looking for a Forerunner device that has the ability to destroy planets. Now this story may sound pretty generic for a Halo game, but need to remember this is just a indie spin-off type of game. It isn't a full-on game, so we need to kind of accept that the story wasn't going to be amazing, but to be honest, for what it is, it's not too bad. The way the situation develops as the UNSC and the Spartans try to defeat the Covenant and defend the planet does start to get a bit more drastic when the whole planet starts ripping apart when the Covenant start activating the device, and that's actually kind of surprising to see, just how dangerous these Forerunner devices can be, and the fact that you can't save everyone when the situation starts to go wrong. And even during among all this chaos, even one of the characters you play as does die. Well, Spartan Davis is the one who dies, because obviously they're not going to kill off Palmer since this is before Halo 4, despite how much everyone hates her. And you obviously won't be seeing any character development too, all you'd really do with these two is play with them. Although it does kind of suck, to be honest, in my opinion, that you don't really play as Spartan Davis all that much. You play him a bit here and there during the first chapter, and you play him throughout the whole of chapter 3, but then there's like 6 chapters throughout this whole game, and most of it you play as Palmer. I mean, that's a bit meh when it comes to the different characters you can play as, since it mainly concentrates more on Palmer than it does on Davis, but I mean, it does have Palmer on the front cover. I also like the fact that it actually does feel like you are playing a simulation. I mean, you have Roland narrating all the cutscenes about what's going on, well, apart from the final chapter, which is because it's a whole secret thing that happened and Palmer tells you about it, but I really like how the game plays out like what it's trying to be, which is a simulation of an important battle that happened in the Halo timeline. But nevertheless, honestly, the campaign was okay. Mediocre at best, I probably will admit, maybe slightly above average, but it was, for a Halo indie spin-off, it was actually okay, and at least it was something. I mean, I felt like it was just there to help build Palmer's character, and we just had like a sort of another Spartan there to help out. But nonetheless, I thought the campaign for Spartan Assault actually still felt like a Halo game. The campaign itself is split into 6 chapters, altogether having about 30 missions, which actually is a pretty decent amount. And overall, it will probably take you about 2 to 4 hours, which for a game like this isn't too bad as well for when it comes to time length. And what makes each of these missions interesting is that they all have a certain score that you have to reach, so you can achieve the ranking of bronze, silver or gold for that mission, which does give you a sort of nice rewarding feeling once you finish them, and shows just how much effort you've put into the level itself. Although there is certain things like skulls and score boosters that you can add in before you start a mission, which will give you a bit of an advantage in getting some of those really high scores, which can be pretty much impossible to get without these certain things. And since this is a Halo game, the skulls will make the missions a lot more difficult to do, but it does add a little bit more of a challenge, since there isn't really a difficulty like easy, normal, hardened, or legendary, which as you usually see in the Halo games. But this does give you a bit of a more rewarding and achievable feeling once you've completed the missions after you've done them. It is an interesting change from the usual things you see in a Halo game, but I thought it was okay and I really liked what they did, because at least they still kept in the skulls, which are a very important piece when it comes to the Halo franchise. And pretty much how you get these points is by killing as many enemies as you can. The higher ranking they are and the more special the kill is, the more points you're going to earn, and this is what you're going to need, especially for when you get to those missions which do have a high level of points to get. Now, before you start each mission in the game, you do have your loadout to select from. You obviously have your default starting weapons, which can actually be pretty useful depending on what they are, but you can choose certain weapons like sniper rifles, Spartan lasers, or rocket launchers to give you a little bit more of an edge over more tougher enemies you may encounter in the missions themselves. And there is also armor abilities and boosters to choose from, which will also give you a little bit more of an edge too, and they can definitely help out. Surprisingly enough, the weapons and armor abilities themselves, as I'll get to, work pretty damn well, and the way this system works is that you can buy some of these weapons and boosters with XP, or, weirdly enough, there is actually microtransactions in this game, which is really fucking weird of all things to have. But yes, you can actually use credits, which are the microtransactions as I said, to buy weapons and gear, and I really don't see the whole point, but the thing is, you don't really get much XP since it all depends on how much points you get in the game, and the more points you get, the more XP you get. But you get so little even if you get a high score that it doesn't really amount to much. And it really doesn't help, especially if you buy a lot of these things, especially if you do it every mission. So you also really need to make sure you keep an eye on the XP you have, so you can actually get some of the better gear for tougher missions. Looking at the weapons and armor abilities available in this game, there is actually a surprisingly large selection of them, especially when it comes to the weapons, as there is a nice selection of weapons you see from Halo 4, and also returning weapons from Halo Reach and Halo 3, like the Brute Shot, the Focus Rifle, the Plasma Repeater. Quite a few weapons actually do return from these games, which is actually kind of surprising since this is the only other game you actually see some of these weapons in. And it's kind of surprising, if these weapons work in this game, why haven't they been brought back in the later Halo games, or the current ones? It's just kind of surprising. I mean, obviously a lot of these weapons are fan favorites. Well, maybe not the Focus Rifle, since that was actually a pile of shit. But in this game it actually works incredibly well, in fact, too well if you ask me. But it's just kind of surprising when you just don't have these sort of weapons anymore. But nevertheless, all the weapons do surprisingly work very well. And yeah, you want to pick, but most of the time you're not going to have a lot of ammunition, since you only have you don't really reload or anything. It's much like in Doom, where you just have a number counter and your ammunition count, and that's pretty much it. No reload or anything like that. You just shoot as many bullets as you can, and when your gun runs out, you pretty much have to find another one. The armor abilities themselves are also very useful, much like the regen field and the hard light shield returned from Halo 4 do provide you with a lot of support against a lot of enemies. There's also sprint, which works in a very weird way, much like the Flash for some reason. And as obviously the auto sentry has returned too, which is actually very useful too. There is also a few extra abilities as well that we haven't seen before, like the Seeker drone, which is sort of like a homing explosive drone and will pretty much attack any enemies it sees until it blows up, which is kind of a strange ability to see in this game, but it just doesn't quite work as well as you'd think. Surprisingly enough, the same can be said for the vehicles and the enemies. A lot of vehicles in this game, even though you have your default Ghost, Wraith, and Scorpion, you do have vehicles like the Grizzly and the Wolverine from Halo Wars here, which is kind of surprising, but maybe not too surprising since this game looks very much like it's based off of Halo Wars, just in a different genre and dynamic. Hell, even with the enemies, you see drones and brutes return after quite a while since Halo Reach, and it's been what, 3 years since we last saw these guys? It's kind of surprising to see these guys in a game again, and the way they work is actually pretty damn well, and the way they should be working, along with the fact that you also have elites, grunts, jackals, and all your other usual suspects, although you don't have hunters, which is actually another surprise in this game to see. But then again, I mean, the enemies are tough enough themselves, as there is a few interesting upgrades some of the enemies have. Like jackals have 2 new things. They can now throw grenades and melee you if you get a bit too close to them, which is something you don't really, we've never really seen in a Halo game. Stealth elites are strong as hell for some reason, And the brutes, well, you only get really two types, which is the jetpack guys and chieftains, but they're enough to take on a few decent amount of bullets. But what is kind of weird is the fact that when you kill a drone, they suddenly sound like the engineers when they die, which is kind of odd, really. But honestly, the enemies themselves are kind of difficult and challenging when you get through more of the missions. They add in and throw more at you than you can handle, and it just gets a little bit difficult at times, especially when you add in stuff like the challenges and the skulls. The skulls definitely make things a hell of a lot tougher with these kind of guys. Hell, they even throw in a boss battle for you, and this guy makes Jul 'Mdama look like a complete and utter wuss with the heat this guy's packing. Dual energy swords and a very strong health and shield bar system. This guy will kick your ass if you're not careful, especially considering he has reinforcements to back him up, and you're all on your own with barely any weapons to kill him with. It can be pretty difficult unless you like spam rocket launcher or like any of the heavy weapons at him. But it can, with the skulls and stuff on, this boss battle can be pretty challenging. One of the more interesting things about this game is the fact that it has a different viewing point for the player than what the normal Halo games usually have. I mean, the fact that you have a top-down viewpoint that you usually see in strategy games, and then combine it with the whole shooter aspect, is definitely something surprising to see in a Halo game, and it's actually very interesting to experience for something when it comes to having shooter controls. It's a hell of a lot different from what we're usually used to, but it's kind of nice, but also kind of weird and wrong at the same time. When it comes to the game's level design, it's actually very mixed. I like some of the levels when they have like big open spaces where you usually have vehicles or just have to take on a lot of enemies, or when it comes to defending certain objectives. However, the main issue with the level design in this game is the fact that they get very repetitive, especially the more you go into the game when it has certain missions that just feel the same and just don't have much to offer other than just you having to kill a bunch of enemies. Some missions do actually break that whole feel, but it's there like half the time and then it isn't there the other half of the time. I mean, there is 30 missions to work with here, so it is going to be a little bit difficult trying to make every mission feel different, but there is a decent amount of missions that do feel different, luckily. Now the soundtrack is actually very interesting since it feels like a combination of the orchestral stuff you hear in the earlier Halo games and combines it with what the direction Halo 4 went with its music, and the combination of the two is actually kind of a very interesting outcome, and it was kind of likable to hear, but most of the time it was the same track and it kind of got a little bit tedious and didn't feel incredibly different, even though it had a very atmospheric feel to it. Now one last thing to mention for this game is the fact that it doesn't just have a campaign mode, which does give you enough to offer in itself, it also has a co-op mode too. Sadly this isn't in the campaign, nor is it linked to it, but instead it has 5 entirely different missions where 2 players do different objectives while trying to fend off the Flood. And that's kind of interesting to see too. It's like we get to see the Flood again, and they are pretty damn tough to take down. They are pretty devastating when they throw a hell of a lot at you. And each of the missions do feel different, especially the ones where you have to like defend some orbs against the Flood, and it can be quite bloody desperate at times when you don't have much ammunition or like stuff to help you and they're all over you. Or this one mission where you have to destroy a number of orbs in a limited amount of time while having loads of Flood up your ass. I mean, those were some of the most memorable missions in the co-op mode, and it was a hell of a lot of fun. And not only is the co-op mode very fun, like the campaign, you also have a loadout to choose from, but it's also kind of weird how you have weapons in this mode that you don't see in the campaign, like machine pistols or the battle rifle. I just don't get why they weren't in the campaign too. And hell, machine pistols is something new to add to Halo's arsenal as well. And it's very weird to see that sort of stuff in this game. But yeah, the co-op mode is a hell of a lot of fun, and it's a very nice addition for such a small game that's really much bigger than you really think about when you look back on it. Overall, despite being mainly aimed at the mobile platform market, Halo Spartan Assault is actually a pretty fun Halo game when you look at it on its own and don't compare it to any of the others, and it does give us some nice background on Palmer, what she's been doing between Halo 3 and 4, even though that probably didn't help her character whatsoever to the Halo community, but nonetheless. So, I'm going to give Halo Spartan Assault So that is my review of Halo Spartan Assault. I know it got a sequel called Spartan Strike. Don't know if I'll play it or not, but I don't think it's available on Xbox, is it? I think that was just for like the mobile platforms itself, which is kind of weird. Guess it's mainly because Spartan Assault wasn't really popular that much. But anyway, I thought it was a fun game, and yeah, maybe some people should try it out or look it up again for old time's sake if there are any Halo fans left that even knew about it. But yeah, hope you guys have enjoyed this review. Leave a like, comment down below on what you like about the game, or comment what other games you think I could do. Share the video on social media, and I shall see you guys in the next random video.